Tom Haberstroh, back on the drive on a Thursday afternoon. Tommy, what's up, man?
Not a whole lot. Looks like we're drawing closer. There's actual Utah Jazz news, and so it feels like we're turning the page a little bit here.
There is Utah Jazz news, Tom, so that's where we'll start. Donovan did speak today. In my estimation, day late, dollar short, but it's better late than never. Your takeaways from his comments were what?
Yeah, I'm with you. I felt like a lot of what he talked about and the drama around his disagreements with Rudy Gobert, the COVID stuff, a lot of self-inflicted. I really felt like if he had come out sooner, swatted that away, any of those concerns, I felt like the silence actually fed the news cycle and fanned the flames a bit. And I think, it's good that he came out and said all this, but I'm with you. It did feel like this would have been a whole lot better a few weeks ago.
And, for a kid that's so sharp and polished and seems to get it, and an organization that more often than not does do things the right way, the fact that Donovan botched it as badly as he did was surprising. And then the fact that the Jazz botched it as badly as they did is surprising to me as well. I mean, I think it was an unmitigated failure on the part of everybody. The analogy I use, Tom, is Rudy was like Apollo Creed in a boxing ring, okay? And he was getting his ass kicked left and right. And standing in the corner with a towel in his hand was Dennis Lindsey, Justin Zanuck, Quinn Snyder. And I just kept screaming, throw the damn towel. Your guy's getting battered. And the fact that they chose to stand there like Rocky did with the towel in his hand as Apollo Creed got murdered was obviously the wrong call. So it's odd because it's a great organization. It's a great front office. And Donovan's a sharp kid. And for all of them to fail so badly is one of the more surprising dynamics of all of this.
Well, I got to say, Donovan might have addressed things today, but I don't think it's the last we'll hear of it.
Sure.
Because I simply think that there's more that we don't know here, and that more might be surfacing why the organization kind of let this play out the way it did. Maybe there's some other underlying circumstances that forced their hand here to just sit this out that we don't know about. And so, again, I'm really high on Dennis Lindsey and the organization, Quinn Snyder, the Utah Jazz. I love the way they play basketball this season when they were rolling. It has nothing to do against them or their on-court prowess, but I do think that this one is just fishy. It doesn't seem like what we're seeing in the news or what we haven't. I put it this way: what we haven't heard about, I think, is a lot more important than what we have heard about, and I think we'll still start hearing about this. And I really wanted to see this team at full strength in this 8 seeding games and the resumption of the season, because I do think that they, in the right circumstances, could win the title this season if things broke their way. Because I think they're so strong. They have a shot maker in Donovan Mitchell and Bogey. I think this was a situation where if Bogey doesn't go down, this is a really, really interesting Jazz team. And I think this storyline with Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, unfortunately, I don't think it's buried the hatchet. I think we're going to probably hear a little bit more trickle out, especially if they get off to a rough start in in Orlando. I could see just things spiraling, and you start to bring out the dirty laundry. And that's what I hope doesn't happen, because I think this team is too good to let this story poison their season.
How much of this, because sometimes we do overthink things and we do make things more complicated than they need to be. I mean, the other reality here, Tom, as far as the Jazz refusal to run interference with this thing is Donovan's 5 years younger, and he's tremendously cheaper than Rudy is. Even next year, when Donovan's going to be able to receive the max contract extension off his rookie deal, it's going to be probably about $150 million cheaper than what Rudy's going to cost because he's eligible for the Supermax. How much of the Jazz unwillingness to say even a damn thing indicates that maybe they're just simply choosing Donovan over Rudy because Donovan's younger, cheaper, and maybe more dynamic?
Right, but I hear that Spence, but that supposes that they don't have a shot at winning this damn thing.
Sure.
Like, I think Rudy and Donovan and Joe Ingles and Mike Conley and Bogdanovich, like that core, if something happens to a star on the Bucks or the Lakers, like I could see that team being the Toronto Raptors of last year, is taking advantage of some injuries and capitalizing on the moment and having a historic run. And so by kicking the can down the road and not stepping in, they're almost saying that, look, the future is Donovan. Let's focus on Donovan and take care of him, because Rudy Gobert, whether it's the max extension or not, or whether they trade him, it does feel like to me that if they aren't stepping in and trying to quell this thing and make it smooth for the playoff stretch, maybe they didn't think that they were a championship viable team in the first place. Because I certainly would want to make sure that everything is smoothed out for the now. And yes, Donovan's young. Donovan is an up-and-coming star in this league. And you want to make sure he's happy, because disgruntled young stars in the league have shown that they will force their hand and move out of smaller markets. We saw what happened to Paul George. We saw what happened to Kevin Durant. These are things that Utah Jazz have to figure out. But by not squashing this and running interference, like you say, I think they're giving up something in the short term.
Absolutely agree with that. And I'll ask you the follow-up, which is just impossible to know, but your best guess that, outside of the interim, because we've asked you the ceiling for the Jazz this year without Bojan, and you and I are of the same mind there. But if we look ahead, which, I mean, it's irresponsible to look ahead at all right now, because we have no idea what the world's going to look like next year, let alone the NBA or the Jazz. But do you think there are future implications as far as maybe the motivation the Jazz would have for moving Rudy or moving on from somebody else as a result of the chaos for the past 16 weeks?
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't have any inside information to say that Rudy is going to be part of their future or not. But I certainly think that this team, as constructed, definitely had championship potential. Without Bogdanovich right now dealing with the hand issue, I don't think that's possible. And that's unfortunate, just because they need as many scorers on that end as they can get. Mike Conley in his prime, maybe he'd be able to fill those gaps. Donovan Mitchell certainly can be a late game assassin, but he can't do it every time. And I think, Rudy Gobert would anchor a top shelf defense, and they weren't always that this season for whatever reason. Whether it was integrating Mike Conley into the fold or not. I think it's unfortunate that the coronavirus situation between Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell kind of swamped what good they had been doing in the second half of the season, because I really think that with that core together, it was going to be right there. And you need to always be right there. For Utah Jazz to be right there is a huge accomplishment. And, not many small markets can say that. And I think Utah, I hope in 5 years they don't look back at this season and say, what if?
Are you leaving any space for a resurgent Mike Conley for next year, or have you seen enough? Our buddy Spencer Nelson, who played pro hoops for about a decade, including some summer league stints with the Jazz, and he's one of our analysts. He is convinced that we need to be patient still and wait to see what it looks like next season. I'm not so sure, but I want to try to leave some space that maybe this deal that we all love so much will ultimately pay dividends. Where are you at right now with that?
Yeah, I'm not feeling good about it. I'll tell you that. I'm always going to leave space. As a probabilistic thinker, I'm always going to leave space. I'm not absolutist. I'm not going to scream. This can never happen. But I do think that Mike Conley needs to show a lot more of that burst, that quickness, getting into the teeth of the defense, finishing at the rim was a huge sore spot for him this season, not even getting to the free throw line for stretches of the season. You can't win in the NBA by doing that. Now, you can be, a 30-plus efficient, defensive-minded star, in his role, kind of like what Kyle Lowry was for the Raptors last year. I think probably too early in the DeMar DeRozan, Kyle Lowry era, people looked at Kyle Lowry like he wasn't going to be a guy who could lead a championship team. And sure enough, they get Kawhi Leonard, and Kyle Lowry is sensational down the stretch, and he probably proved a lot of doubters wrong in this kind of like second resurgence of his career. Do I see Mike Conley doing that next year? Probably not. He's not as big as Kyle Lowry. He's not as I would say Kyle Lowry's just in a different echelon right now. But especially with the Achilles injury and the hamstring, it's a big injury risk for Mike Conley going forward. It's a big injury question. And, the production, I just don't know if he'll ever get back to what he was in his prime years in Memphis, simply because Father Time is undefeated in this league.
Do you have a hot Jordan Clarkson take? Jordan is a free agent, and he really came here and played well. And I like the way Quinn used him. Jay-Z with a great trade. I mean, look, I always liked Dante Exum's potential, but at some point, shame on me, and so I understood why they moved on from him, and Jordan stepped in and for about 2 months was as good as anyone in the league off the bench, maybe with, outside of the Clippers guys. But do you anticipate the Jazz making him an offer to keep him here? And what do you make of his fit here in Salt Lake?
Yeah, it makes me nervous, Spence, because a lot of these deals go south when you're making, decisions based off a half a season of play. And I get nervous when those situations come about. We've seen it so many times in this league where a Solomon Hill, even just a run in the NCAA tournament makes you a lottery pick when you shouldn't have been that way. You want to keep the whole track record in mind. And Jordan Clarkson has played really well in his role. Exceedingly better than I expected. He's definitely outperformed my expectation for him. But I would be wary of saying that that's the new normal. We've seen it so many times in this league where someone goes on a hot streak in the playoffs, you double down on that, and it ends up biting you and it doesn't really pan out the way you wish. So Jordan Clarkson, amazing performance so far. Do I think that they should give him a really big contract this summer to ensure that he can be a top shelf scorer off the bench? I don't know, but I think they should be really, really happy with what they've gotten so far.
Catching up with our buddy Tom Haberstroh, NBA Daily Assist 2.0 time, NBC Sports National NBA Insider, also host of one of my favorite NBA podcasts, The Haber Show. I saw that Trey Burke landed in Dallas. The reason I bring it up, Tom, is that I thought Trey was going to be good. I loved watching him in college. There was a little Chris Paul element to him, and I was wrong. The reason I bring it up is give me an example of a college player who you thought was going to be awesome in the NBA and just never worked out that way.
Can I go to my alma mater here?
Absolutely. Staples? Just kidding. I thought we were going to have some Ernie Varina talk or something.
I don't think we had much NBA material coming out of Staples, as you can agree.
Fair enough.
I'm going to go with Randolph Childress.
Okay.
Randolph Childress at Wake Forest was a killer. Him and Tim Duncan in that ACC tournament was so good. I thought he was going to be a great NBA player. And I was a Carolina fan at the time, so I'm not even saying that I was a Wake fan at this point, and this is what my Wake eyes were telling me. But I thought Randolph Childress was going to be a stud in the NBA. Didn't pan out for him, but I'm glad he's on the coaching staff at Wake Forest right now. And if you want to feel old, just know that his son just finished his senior year at Wake Forest.
Wow.
And had an amazing overtime game against Duke this year, and the first win over Duke that Wake Forest has had in a long time. But Brandon Childress, yes, Randolph Childress' son, is already done with his college career.
That's crazy to think about. As a Wake Forest guy, who is the most hated? Is Duke the hated program?
Yeah, so we're in a weird spot because we're not Carolina and we're not Duke. We're kind of this like little brother down Tobacco Road in Winston-Salem. I would probably say there's more hatred for Duke because it is kind of a small school in the same tier as Wake Forest. My Duke buddies will tell me that Wake is a safety school for Duke, and they laugh at me for that. But I think when you're dealing with Carolina, how big it is, I just think the closer rival is Duke, simply because they're both private schools in North Carolina. But, man, this new coach, Steve Forbes from East Tennessee State, he's got some big shoes to fill in terms of just the program. It's been a while since Wake Forest was a national contender back in the Chris Paul days, and Skip Prosser, may he rest in peace. This is going to be a long road to get back into the level of Carolina and Duke. Make no mistake about it.
I was listening to the Daily, ESPN's podcast they put up every day. Mina hosts it, and she's great. Now she's going to hand it over to Pablo, and he's great too. But they were both on it today. And Pablo made a really good point that I want to get your thoughts on, and that is, and I agree with him, when Kyrie came out with the intensity that he did as far as wanting to support the race discussion that has kind of taken over our country and continue to support activism and such, and trying to encourage some players to follow him. My anticipation, Tom, is that we were going to see a lot of players follow suit in lock stock. And as it is, it's really kind of only been Avery Bradley and Dwight Howard a little bit, but we haven't seen that movement that I thought we were going to see. And I thought Pablo brought that up and put it very well this morning. Are you in the same camp? Did you think we were going to see more players kind of tap out to support the cause?
Man, money talks. And that's not to say that these guys have no soul and they're just, these capitalists that want to, fill their bank accounts. But I think leaving the bubble and not resuming the season also means that they give up potentially millions of dollars. And so I think when the NBA and the Players Union presented the financials of the bubble and the future, if the bubble doesn't happen and if a bunch of stars leave and don't play in the bubble, what kind of hit that would be for the television contracts and for the league itself and the health of the league, I think it changes things. And I think, you saw Fred VanVleet, the starting guard for the NBA champion Toronto Raptors, say, morally, they should not be going to the bubble. Morally, he thinks that there's no question they shouldn't be partaking in this resumption of the season to focus on, the social injustices in this country and the Black Lives Matter movement. But of course, they've got to pay the bills. They've got, their jobs. A lot of people depend on them. And so they understood that this isn't as cut and dry as what is the right thing to do. It's a lot of gray, not black and white. So I think Kyrie, fair or not, came out strongly, but I do think that his track record and his consistencies in his argument hurt his case a little bit among the sway for the players. And so I think when you talk about the message of, hey, we should rethink this and not go to the bubble and focus more on racism, ending racism in this country, if the speaker was LeBron and not Kyrie, I think that the circumstances would be very different and the fallout would be very different than if it was Kyrie Irving.
Okay, so let's say 100% represents the pie, okay? 100% represents the pie. What percentage of the motivation of the league right now is about money, and what percentage of the league right now is about getting back for the sanctity of the game of basketball and the fans?
Oh, I'd say it's about 60% is money. I mean, I like to hear Adam Silver talk about, coming back to give some sort of normalcy for fans in America. But to me, look, maybe I'm cynical and I'm jaded from covering this league. It's about the money. They could have done 16 teams, but they went to 22. Why? Because that's a lot more money. It's a lot more markets that are happy, and it's a lot more fans that are happy. And by having 22 teams come back versus 16, you create a little bit more juice, and you also risk a lot more infection. So I think, the right thing to do, I don't know if resuming the season is morally or politically the right thing to do. But I do think that money is a driving factor of this. And I know Adam Silver is going to say, look, we're spending, what Brian Windhurst reported, $150 million to resume the season. Like, look, this is going to be a huge cost to us. Look, if this wasn't about money, I don't think that they're resuming this season, because you're leaving families for months at a time. You're leaving not just a nation dealing with protests and social injustice reform, you're also leaving your families. And it's just, on some level, it's kind of heartbreaking to see, some of these families having to say goodbye to their fathers, their brothers, executives, their family members for months at a time to resume a sport. But this is a business, and we should not be naive to think that it's not about money at the end of the day.
See, I respect that you said 60%. I think that's awfully low. I think it's closer to 80 or 90. And now we hear today, Tommy, that the NBA's report, and this is according to Woj and Jackie McMullen, at least that's where I saw it, that the league is looking at the another bubble in Chicago for the 8 non-Orlando teams. If this isn't 100% about money, Tom, I don't know what is.
So I had been hearing that for a while. I actually heard that they were looking at Detroit or Minnesota for the non-bubble teams to have some sort of micro season for them. And I've talked to a couple coaches on those teams, and they legit worry about the development of their young guys if they're on their tails for 9 months. Like, they really do. So maybe I'm talking to the wrong people, Spence, but there is a legitimate worry that if these guys don't play basketball when they're 20, 21, 22, 23 years old, it's going to be a huge drawback for those players in their development. So I do think there's a little bit of that. But yeah, the Chicago idea certainly is motivated in part by money, if not mostly motivated by money. But there is a real concern for a lot of these players and coaches and teams that 9 months of no basketball will be really critical in the wrong direction and damaging to their overall success. And remember, those teams that are not in the Orlando bubble, they need their players to develop. They need their youngsters. They're mostly made up of young studs that aren't fully formed yet. So it's doubly damaging for them because they are riding so much on that development that might be going in the wrong direction.
Tommy, you're the man. We appreciate your time as always and the knowledge you drop on the program. Have a safe, fun weekend ahead, and we'll catch up next week, okay?
You too, Spence. Happy 4th of July.